One of the outstanding things about this picture, of course, are the copper color of the boilers, and the so this wonderful color of the boilers, and it's picked up by the leaves and plants on the table here. And so what I'd like to do is bring out this color as much as possible, and also as always, get rid of any color casts we may have. And I'm going to start off by just focusing on the color cast that this image has. Also, I'd just like to point out this is really a beautiful image as it comes out of the camera. This was captured as a raw image and then converted using neutral settings into a JPEG image. So this is essentially the way the image would come out of the camera. And it looks very good. So you almost wonder, well, what could be improved by this? So let's go into Curvemeister, and the first thing we'll do is just prowl around a little bit and look at things. So I usually do an Alt-click, and as you can see, the boilers actually are an extremely saturated skin tone. Copper is really in the same hue range as that skin tones are. So when checking for color casts, it's good to look for things that you think are going to be white, that you would bet even money are actually white objects. The ceiling stands out, and notice it's quite blue and cyan. If that's a cyan ceiling, that would explain the color, but a more likely explanation is that there's daylight bouncing from outside and lighting the ceiling up. That's a very common situation. These whites are no good, of course, because they're completely blown out. They're going to be a pure white no matter what. And likewise for the window. This area is also going to have, it's got actually a greenish cast if you look at the hue clock. So just prowling around, there are some papers posted on the wall here. And this one is a sort of an orange color in between red and yellow. This one's an orange color. And by orange I don't mean a saturated pumpkin color of orange, but just that it's pointing to the color orange on the hue clock. So either all these sheets of paper were printed on orange stock, or we have an overall orange color cast to the image, which with these large boilers reflecting the copper colored light, I think an orange color is extremely likely here. And we also have what looks like a large salt shaker, which is a wonderful neutral, salt being pretty much neutral the world around. And as you can see, that's a really beautiful solid orange cast. So we're going to start by plunking a neutral right on this this large salt shaker and see if we like the way the image looks. And truthfully, I really hate the way the image looks. When we take the cast out completely, everything looks washed out. So I'm going to try a neutral up here a little more conservatively on the one of these paper signs or white signs on back on the wall. That's a little more reasonable. So we're going to go with that for our neutral, and we'll settle for the salt being slightly on, quite a bit actually, on the orange side. Okay, so now that we have a neutral, we can start messing with the lightness curve. And I'm going to Alt-click here to take another look at the shadow detail that we have. And as you can see, these chairs are pretty much a pure jet black. They have a tiny amount of color in them. The negative signs in LAB always mean a cool color, so we have a sort of bluish or greenish cast to the shadows here. It's very slight though. And I'm going to peek at this in RGB because I want to see if there's any kind of anything in these shadows. And as you can see, there's just a little bit of blue channel in these chairs, and most of that is due to see these numbers here. That the 3 zeros are the before values, and the 1 and 9 indicate the green and blue values after we set our neutral. So there's really no detail to speak of in these chairs, and that says to me that we're going to give up a lot of this detail in the bottom third of the picture, because there's not a lot there to look at. The main feature of this image, in any case, is the copper boilers, and maybe the centerpiece of the table here. So let's start by doing one of my favorite tricks. I call this the lizard tail, where you grab the top curve and attempt to extract and get some detail in the highlights. And so our initial position is like this, and I'm going to just try to darken down some of the really bright stuff in the boiler here. And now I'm going to move along and watch where the color worm is on the boilers. And as you can see, it's about in the lower third of the lightness curve. So we want to sort of bump that up a little bit and manually create a contrast pin, which is basically 2 curve points that will bring out contrast in an area. So as you can see, we're darkening the chairs down again, but we're bringing out a little more detail in the boilers and brightening them up just a bit. Now there's a bad shape appearing here. Notice this kink. We don't want to have kinks like that in our curve, because that'll create flat spots that are going to look really bad. So okay, but we are bringing out a little more contrast and brightness in the boilers themselves. So we'll see how far we can go with that. Okay. So let's hit compare and see what we did as far as brightness. I sort of like the extra detail in the boiler. I'm not so nuts about what's happening in the shadows. So let's darken them down just a bit here. Okay, and do a compare. Now one thing we're losing here in adding this additional brightness to the boilers and the contrast is we are losing some color. So now that because we have a neutral here, we can mess with the saturation and bring that color up just a bit, just until we don't, looks like we're overdoing it slightly, and then back off a bit. Okay, so we have a nice copper color in the boilers. One thing I also like to do is to bring up the individual A and B curves and see if we can squeeze a little more color out that way. And okay, let's try that in both of these guys. Okay, so I'm still not totally happy with the shadows here, so I'm going to come in here and just knock those down a bit, because we're getting a sort of bluish look here in the chairs that I'm not nuts about. Okay, so that's the before image, which still looks pretty good, and the after image has a little more sparkle and color in the boilers. So anyway, that's about as far as I'm going to go with this image. The little bit of detective work finding the neutral, setting a neutral, and then messing with the curve points to bring out detail in parts of the image that we think are important, and then a color boost. So that's a fairly typical pattern for the way that I usually work with Curvemeister, is to work in LAB. Anyway, that's about all I have planned for this image, but I'm open for
Mike,
any
I
questions
noticed you
at
have
this
on
point.
your sample point,
Before
you have the
might
DE
wanna
equals 0.00. Is that just, is
ask
there a reason
about.
for that?
Mike, I noticed you have on your sample point, you have the DE equals 0.00. Is that just, is there a reason for that?
Good question. The
Well, that's just
I
so
think
that's
I
an
just
artifact
have
of
an
something we did
option
before, in other
set
words.
to display. I'm not even sure where that is controlled, frankly.
Well, that's just, so that's an artifact of something we did before, in other words.
Yeah, there's an option to display what's called delta E, which is subtracting two color values and showing how different they are. And in this case, in the case of a sample, it will take the pin color
So,
and compare
so for
that
mere
to the
mortals,
image
we don't need to
color
worry
and
about
give you a
that.
delta E value. So let me see where I can.
So for mere mortals, we don't need to worry about that.
No, normally not. It can be an interesting value to have, and now I don't remember where I control that, frankly. Let me look. Okay. Yeah, show delta E. So this was a person, God no, what's the guy's name? Anyway, several years ago, someone bought me a lobster and steak dinner to put this feature in. You can show things like standard deviation, which shows how much variation there is in the sample, signal to noise ratio, and also delta E. So we can just get rid of that, and that will
The other question is, when I do landscapes, I oftentimes have blue
display a little
shadows
more
and screwy
compact.
highlights.
Good.
I'd always
Yeah, I've
do
been having that
RGB
not
color
annoying when
correction.
I've
Is
seen it.
that better? Is it something you should be doing in things with is a wide range of values and color shades?
RGB color correction, is that better, something you should be doing in things with a wide range of values and color shades?
Well, that's a good question, and in fact, in this case, we are winding up with a screwy blue color cast in the chairs here, and we would want to get rid of that. It's a characteristic of LAB that if you apply a color correction, in this case the neutral, it will apply that everywhere in the image uniformly. And the typical way to get rid of that is to use the blend diff sliders in Photoshop to get rid of that blue cast. But you can also, in fact, let's just spend a little time on an RGB version of this image and see what that looks like. RGB has the advantage that you can apply a different color correction to different
Hey, Mike,
color ranges.
excuse me.
Specifically,
I don't see
to
anything
apply,
on the screen.
we could apply a neutral to the
Yeah, it's
chairs,
just
for example.
a blank blue.
Um,
Hey, Mike,
Uh-huh.
excuse me. I
Yeah.
don't see anything on the screen.
oh, really?
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
blank
there's
blue.
the same here. I just see
That's not good.
Mikoto is just a blue screen.
Yeah.
Are the rest of you seeing?
I'm seeing a blue screen too. So
Mikoto is just a blue screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Are all of you seeing? Excuse me.
I've seen a blue screen too, so.
Okay, it's unanimous. Well, I must be a good talker then, though, for you guys to.
Negative here.
Okay.
Still a
let's,
blue screen. Okay. Now I
there
got
we
you.
go.
you're back.
How's that look?
Negative here. Still a blue screen.
Still a blue.
Now I got you.
Yeah, it's
You're back.
Okay, good.
Still
I
a
don't know
blue
what
sc-
happened
yeah, there
there,
it's
but
coming
there's a
now.
setting in
okay.
Makogo that can stop the
Yeah, there it's coming now.
okay.
No, only after you change this
Excuse me.
setting for the delta
Has
E.
it been a blue screen
What?
the whole time, or did
Yeah.
it shift?
No, only after you change this setting for the delta E.
Wow, really? Okay. Well, we're still learning about this whole process, so please do chime in if the whole image goes away on you. So in response to Lowell's question, let's try doing an RGB correction, and it'll have the nice effect that we can keep the chairs black in the first place. We can set, this is basically a mid-tone neutral, and we could also, if we wanted, set a we might be able to get the ceiling neutral. Now I don't know what's going to happen when we do that, but if you don't mind a little adventuresomeness, we could give that a try. So what I'm doing, by the way, when I'm moving around here, putting the cursor over various points in the image, is I'm looking at the hue clock in the upper right corner, right over here, to see what the color casts are. So that's just something I sort of do automatically while looking at an image. It's okay, so let's set a neutral in the ceiling and see what that looks
excuse
like.
me, can you show me how you
interesting
set
effect.
that neutral point?
So we're yanking.
Mike,
Yeah.
excuse me. Can you show me how you set that neutral point?
Sure. Yeah, let's delete it out of here, which I do by pressing the delete key. Okay, so at this point we have a neutral here and a neutral here. You can see on the curves those little these guys with the little pins on them, or these are two neutral points sitting on the curves. And now I'm going to set one up in the ceiling, and before I click, I always looked at where the color worm is on the right and make sure it's not too close to those other two neutrals, because if it is, we'll get a really terrible bend in our curve and it'll look awful and we'll have to delete it. So I right click on the point and just go to set neutral, and then keep my fingers crossed. Now I got something weird happening in the red curve here. That's a fairly intense curve there. I'm wondering why it's even doing that. Okay, I'm going to click reset to get rid of all the neutrals, and we're just going to put them in again. So here's what I'm calling our highlight neutral. We'll put that in the ceiling. Okay, we'll put a neutral back on the sheet of paper in the back, and we'll put a neutral on one of the chairs. So this is a case where we can take three neutrals, plunk them down, and apparently not have any nasty after effects, although the blue curve is what I would call a borderline kind of neutral. It's getting a little squirrely on us. What we can do now is move these neutrals around slightly. This is a feature called floating neutrals, and I'm just going to move them around to try to get the kinks out of the curve so that we don't have any extreme bends in the curves, if we can avoid those. And okay, and now we can do, I don't like this green in the walls here along this area, so I'm going to manually just sort of pull the green down and get that just so it visually looks a little better. Okay, and now so this is a good example of how you can get several neutrals going in RGB color space, but you have to be very careful that you're not losing some important detail. For example, if you notice the red curve has this nasty bend at the top, that shape makes me nervous when I see it. In fact, just for my own security, I'm going to pull that red down just so it doesn't look quite as extreme. And now we're going to mess with the RGB curve in order to bring out that detail again in the boilers. Now maybe you like the boilers having this nice deep color, but I sort of want to make it so that the detail comes out a little bit more. And one thing, as I move across this boiler with the cursor, you can see the RGB curve has three color worms on it. There's a blue one, a green one, and a red one. And what that indicates is where the particular channel values, the red, green, and blue components, occur on that RGB curve. So as you can see, if we add a curve in RGB, we want to try to, if we can, to affect those three components equally. So let's try it and see what happens. What we want to do is lighten and get some more detail into the boilers. and still keep things fairly dark under the chairs, because they we know we don't have a lot of detail down there in the first place. So anyway, this is an RGB correction. As you can see, it has a very different character from the LAB correction. The chairs don't have that bluish cast. We're able to take the color cast out of the ceiling completely and still get some nice copper look in the boiler. So I'm going to click compare. That's our original image, and when we let go, you can see there's a lot more detail popping out of the copper here. It's just a more intense burnished look. And I'm gonna click apply here so that we go back to Photoshop, and I'll show you another thing that I often resort to, which is the there should be a fade here somewhere. Yeah, fade, Curvemeister 3. We can take the filter that we applied, we can slide it to 0 and see the original image. We can see where we got when we were in Curvemeister, all enthused and going after color and contrast and so forth. And if we want, we can back off from that and get something that's more of a sort of happy medium. And this is just a judgmental thing that you can make, but maybe you're like, okay, you know, the original image was pretty good, and maybe I overdid it when I went into Curvemeister and did too much. So you can back off and fade it out. So you know, that's just your own kind of judgment. Once you click OK and save the image, you don't have this option anymore. So that's our first image with
So
are there any
I'm
more
sorry, go
questions
ahead.
here
On this one,
on this one?
but when you put your highlight and shadow points, are they also neutrals?
This one. But when you put your highlight and shadow points, are they also neutrals?
They are neutrals, and they also enforce a relatively pure, you know, dark black and bright white. In fact, Curvemeister ships with some rather harsh defaults that probably shouldn't be that way, and we'll discuss those on the next image. But in this case, I didn't want to force the ceiling to be pure white, because as you can see on the info palette here, it's down in the range of 180 to 200, and that's quite a distance away from 255. So, but you're right. That's a good observation. I did not use shadow and highlight. Instead, I just used 3 neutrals, and then manually sort of brightened and darkened things. So shadow and highlight are fairly intense. If you have an object that's extremely pure white and you want it to retain a little bit of detail, then that would be a definition of a highlight. But we don't really have what I would call a highlight in this image. Shadows we do have. The chairs count as a shadow because they're down at very close to RGB 0. So we could have used a shadow for these guys. That would have worked quite well. Okay, so on to the next image. And someone mentioned, I'm going to try to remember to save the curve files as I go on this. We're already 26 minutes. Now, how long does Greg usually do?
They vary.
Sessions is about an hour.
I'm finding the time's going by a lot faster than I thought it would.
Sessions is about an hour.
Okay, So I'm going to try to stay close to the hour, which means, and Lowell has provided us with quite a few images here. So I'm going to do at least 2 or 3 more images, and there's a neat trick that I just learned about this week for pasting, faking people's faces. So you could take the example, took Tom Cruise's head and put some Brad Pitt's face onto it, and it's quite a neat little trick. And it involves color matching and so forth. So I wanted to show you that at the very end. So okay, let's just move this guy over here, and here's a nice picture that
That was in the Alsace in France.
So, what city is this, Lowell?
The Alsace area.
Let me see. That was in the Alsace in France.
Oh, okay.
The Alsace area.
Great. Well, this is another image that looks quite good going in. What I'm going to try to do is to brighten up the colors on this nice yellow building. If we're lucky, we could also get a little more texture on this the tower here. But above all, I want to get some more action in the sky. I think these clouds have a lot of potential, and I'd like to see more sky happening here. So let's see if we can get, with those goals in mind, see what we can do. And once again, I'm going to start in LAB because I'm an LAB maniac. And let's start by using a hue clock. You can see there's not much of a color cast at all. In an image like this, the clouds are just a marvelous source of pure white diffuse light, and you can see the hue clock in the center here almost never gets to any appreciable length. So we're happy with this hue clock, with the overall neutrality of the image. So let's move on to the lightness curve, and I'm going to try to find an area. As you can see, as we move around in the sky, and this is pretty typical, we can't get much of a color worm on the right here. The lightness shows just a dot. So we're going to just move around the sky a little bit and see what kind of range we have. And it looks like the sky occupies about the upper fourth to upper third of the lightness curve. So I'm going to put a big bend in here and see what we can get in the upper regions of the sky. And I think we're getting a little drama going here. We have some quite dark areas of sky. I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep that and also keep some detail in the buildings. Okay, but we're getting a little something going in the sky. And let's look here. The church tower, where I would like to have some details, quite low down here. So let's bring him up. And now we're getting some nice detail. I'll click compare and show you. Well, we're about where we were before. Okay. I want to get a little more, make those bricks stand out a little bit better if I can. Okay, and now here's an area that always worries me. When you get this extent of a flattened curve, oops, someone's breathing quite loudly here, so if you could all turn your mics on mute, that would be great. Thank you. And let's see. But don't hesitate to chime in if you have a question. It's a lot of the energy of the class is dependent on you guys asking your questions. Okay, so we got a lot more contrast here, and I'll press the compare button. That's the, if you look at the brick on the church tower, you'll see we get a lot more detail there, and you never gain detail without sacrificing it somewhere. And Can anyone see where, just when I click compare,
I think
this
in the
is new
sky.
image. This is the old one. Can you see where we're losing detail in this image?
I think in the sky.
Well, this is our
Uh-huh.
new one, like this. Okay, when I press compare, that's the sky. So the sky's a little less contrasty. Anyway, I'll tell you the answer. If you look at the yellow front of the building and specifically the shadows of the geraniums, okay, this is what we changed, and here's the original now. See that shadow has sort of gone lightened up a little bit on the front of the building. So, can we live with that? Or if not, we could move this point around a little bit and get that contrast back in the front of the building. But I'm thinking we're gaining a little contrast in the sky here, and we're gaining some in this darker area. So let's try and live with that, losing the shadow in the front of the building. Okay, now I'm going to do my standard move, which is to see how much of this saturation slider we can take before we don't like it. And it's right at about 1.5 or so. It gets to be too much. So what we're doing is basically freshening the paint up and making it look like this building was painted more recently. We would also like, if we could, I'm going to show all three curves here, get a little more blue happening in here. And my favorite trick for doing that is to use a command that I added just for this purpose. It's called pin grid, and it lets us pin the upper right half of this curve down just by throwing some control points on it. And now, and these were chosen carefully so that we can move this endpoint now and see if we can get more blue in the sky without torquing the heck out of this yellow area. So we can move this around, and we're in effect changing, greatly increasing the amount of blue in this picture. And I sort of like it like this. Your mileage may vary. You can make your own decision. So I'm going to press compare once again, and we're going to look. We'll now see the old image. There's the old one. And when we let go, we'll see the result of adding more color to the front of the building, bumping this blue way up, and then putting a little more contrast into the sky. Okay, so this time I am going to save our curve, and let's find a nice place to save this. So I'll upload these curve files also. Okay. Sorry about this. Let's find. Here we go. I'll just save this with the image. So, any questions about this image?
That image sort of looks to me like the shadow highlights. Are the shadow highlights command, are they just too far from 0, 0, and 25, 255, 255 to make any difference?
It sort of looks to me like the shadow highlights. Are the shadow highlights command, are they just too far from 0, 0, and 25, 255, 255 to make any difference?
Well, you know, I haven't been using those during this, and let's. That's a really good
Back to
question.
blue.
There's something else I'd like to show you too. So let's do.
You're back to a blue screen. You're back to a blue
reset
screen.
here. So
Just-
we're now back to
yeah.
the original image, and yeah, we're back to our original. And let's try a shadow.
You're back to blue screen. You're back to blue screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good Lord. Okay. That's amazing.
You're back.
Okay. How's that? That should bring it. That's
You're back.
that's pretty incredible. Okay, so I've tried. I have another window that you can't see where I have Photoshop selected, and I've selected a different application now. So maybe let's try reset again and see what happens. We still good? Okay. So I want to show you something about the shadow highlight settings. There's a secret screen in Curvemeister. Let's see, where is it? It's so secret, even I don't know where it is. Yeah, shadow target and highlight target. Now, as Curvemeister ships, these are set to pure black and pure white, which is just not right. And I've considered changing these, but I like to give us a little more headroom. We can set it to, the black point, shadow point to 10, 10, 10, and the highlight target to 245, 245, 245. So that allows us, whenever we set a shadow and highlight, we're going to now have a little headroom in the blacks and whites. And
you're
so
back
if
to
we
blue
were going
again.
to do a shadow highlight on this one, we could set shadow, and now as we drag it around,
You're back to blue again.
oh my god, really? Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. I don't know what's going on with this. So, thanks for telling me, by the way. I have I'm going to try a different option in Makogo okay. So, as we move the black point around, you'll see we get what's called a thresholded view of the image. So we're seeing everything that's as dark or darker than the point we're on top of. And when we hit an area that's really black, we're going to just see the vaguest outlines of the rest of the image showing as pure black. And so what I usually do is I try to just get that into as small an area as possible. And notice this doorway is a pure black, so we can move around in there all we want, and nothing's going to happen. So anyway, that's a black point. It turns out that's not going to make any difference in the appearance of the image. Well, it does make a slight difference. As for white point, this could be more interesting because this is an overall fairly gray image, and I would guess that the brightest areas are down here in these houses. So let's set a highlight there, and we'll move the highlight around a bit. Well, I was wrong. The brightest areas are up in the clouds. So yeah. So you can see I'm sort of chasing the brightest part of this image, and it's right here in the sky, believe it or not. So if we do a compare, we did brighten the image up somewhat. So that's an exercise that's definitely worth doing. And then we can move the lightness curve around to try to get some more action up in the sky and get something like what we had before. That's a nice sky. I like that. But we're again robbing from the front of that building, and in this case a little too much. So I'm going to level this curve out a little bit. So anyway, that's just sort of showing you how you might use shadow and highlight. I used to start all of my images by doing a shadow highlight, and I don't do that so much anymore. I tend to set a neutral and then move the curve around manually. But that facility is there if you want it. And let me show you another way to do shadow highlight. And you can move the left and right edges of the lightness curve, and you'll also get the same effect of a shadow highlight. So you just move it until you start to see some black pixels, which we have plenty of already. And ditto for the lightness. Move it until you start to see pure white areas poke through. Right there. So now we gain some extra contrast. And the beautiful thing about this gain in contrast is we're not giving anything away by setting shadow and highlight either this way or by moving the points around. We make sure that all the important areas of the image are gaining a little bit of contrast. Okay, so anyway, that was showing you this this strange option for shadow and highlight target. I like these values better than Curvemeister's default, so you might want to set that yourself in your copy of Curvemeister. Another thing is I just noticed these are slate roofs. Slate is a beautiful neutral. It's as good as an asphalt road or anything else. So when you're in a European picture and you see these beautiful slate roofs, go for them. They tend to be a perfect gray reference. And you'll often have the impression that they're slightly blue, and that's because they're usually lit by blue sky, and but they actually are a neutral, and it's a good reference. So, okay, well that's that image, and I don't remember if I saved the curve file or not. This is an interesting one. There's a similar image to it right here. Let's see. Is it here? No. Okay, well, let's do this image. What I'm going to try for, just looking in general at this image, is first look for a color cast. I'm going to guess we have a bluish color cast in this area of the image, and that we're pretty neutral here. Also, this area is, just to my taste, a little too bright. I'm going to darken it down a little bit, and then maybe see if we can make the colors a little richer in this bright portion of the image, and also at the same time get some colors here. So just for variety, this time I'm going to do this one in RGB. And I would say that probably 95% of the corrections I do are either in LAB or RGB. I make very little use of HSB. I consider that to be more of a specialized color space. And CMYK, or in this case wide gamut CMYK, I use very seldom, but it's great when you want to do subtle adjustments to colors, in particular skin tones. This is the go-to color space for that. So let's go into RGB, and you can also do the same trick with the RGB curve. I'm going to make the curve larger here. You can move the edges, and you'll see a color version of the thresholding. So wherever blue is hits a value equal to the value set in your white point, so that white point setting is important, you'll start to see pure blue in the image. So we want to get to where we're seeing almost no pure blue. Notice the reds and greens. We're still seeing some pure reds and greens. So those we want to back off if we can. So there goes the greens. Although you'll see it as yellow, that means the red and green are both topped out. So we can't really move in very much on this guy because we have some colors that are topped out already. So let's try. And coming in from the shadow, we're similarly constrained in that we already have some areas that are pure black. So when we're moving the shadow in, any area that's highlighted as pure red already has the shadow value in red tone. So we can't really come in on either end of this in RGB mode because the various colors are already hitting the boundaries of either 0 or 255. So let's try LAB just out of curiosity and see if we can come in on those. And sure enough, we already have areas of pure black, and we already have areas of pure white. So we can't really come in on either end on the in either color space here. So shadow and highlight are pretty irrelevant to this image, interestingly. So let's try looking around at various colors here. You can see there's a slight orange cast here. There's a blue cyan cast in this lamp, which is almost certainly a neutral color. The building might or might not be neutral. but this guy almost certainly is, because you don't usually use tinted glass in a street lamp. It's certainly possible, though. Let's look over at the sign, and this is the clincher. Even if the street lamp were made with slightly bluish cyan glass, they would not coincidentally have this the sign above this shop also the same shade of blue cyan. So detective work, or similar shade, is telling me this should be a neutral. So we'll set this as a neutral. And there's two ways to do a neutral, by the way. If we just plunk down a neutral, you'll notice in the red, green, and blue we have these points set down here. Okay, that's a fine way to set a neutral. But another way to do it, I'm going to do a reset here, is we can manually change the curves. So as you can see, we're just a teeny bit short on red. Could come up a little higher, and green could come up a little higher. What you do is you can just brutally grab the top end of red and move it up until it matches that 149. And for this, it often helps to make the curve larger. So we got our 149 for red, and let's get a 149 for green, if we can. So that's another way to set a neutral. And the difference when we do it this way is where we're changing the color slightly in the entire image. And sometimes you want to do that. Other times you don't want to do that. You want to set it as we did with the copper boilers. We set different neutrals depending on how bright things were. Okay, so what I would really like to do is darken this middle area here if we can. And one way to do that is what I call the lizard tail move, which consists of grabbing this endpoint and then bringing it sharply down. And what that does is it really aggressively brings out any detail you have in the highlights. It's like tell your highlights to empty their pockets and give you all their detail. You can really squeeze some detail with this lizard tail move. And as you can see, when we come in, we start to see colors and shades in the middle here that weren't really visible before. I'll click compare. This is the old image. You can see it's almost pure white in the middle there. And now with this move we did, we're getting some really nice detail in the middle here. Now, who are we stealing from to get that? We're stealing from the entire rest of the image. Pretty severely, actually. We're reducing the contrast. If you look at this this line here, it is no longer at a 45-degree angle. It's substantially less. So another tactic, less extreme than the lizard tail, would be to put a couple curve points in. Drag this down until we start to see our nice color and details. Ooh, here comes Greg. Okay, now I gotta find Skype. I want to let Greg into our session here, and I can't find the screen. Oh God. Okay, I'm gonna call Greg and add him in. Because we want Greg, don't we?
Greetings, everyone.
Okay, Greg. Here he comes. Hey, Greg.
This is a great correction there, Mike. That's wonderful, Mike.
Criticizing me or saying I'm doing it wrong or anything, so maybe you can change that.
This is a great correction there, Mike. That's wonderful, Mike.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to go after me. Okay, so, or a little bit, not too much. So, anyway, I just wanted to show an RGB correction where we could darken those middle buildings down a little bit and put some color into them. So you can see that RGB is very capable of adding saturation in a way that would be hard to do in LAB. So I'm going to click compare here, so you can see there's the original image, which is not bad, and our new version has a little more detail and color in those middle buildings. Like this tan building, you could barely tell from the white building before, and now it shows up quite clearly that they're different colors. So, and there's more that you could do with this too. For example, get a little more oomph into the shadows and various other things. So anyway, that's about all I wanted to show for this image. We're at 54 minutes. I did sort of want to show this face replacement trick.
So, Mike, one of the questions about the old photo was you've done one pass in the lab or one pass in RGB. Do you oftentimes do one pass each to fix the shadows and then color boost with the lab? Is that how you, or is that obviously depends on the photo?
One pass each, fix the shadows, then color boost with the lab. Is that how you, or is that obviously depends on the photo?
Well, I'll tell you the most common case where I do two pass is I love LAB. It's like my go-to color space, okay? But it has a real problem, and I'll show you an example here, which is the same thing we saw with the earlier image, and that is if you you can actually make that looks pretty actually. So there's a lot you could do with the colors in this image. In fact, let's just, this has gotten me interested here. Let's do a reset and just do a quick LAB correction here. So just bumping the colors. I mean, this is really,
it's begging for a saturation mask, though.
Like, look at the colors up here in the roof here.
It's begging for a saturation mask, though.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I'm just a sucker for saturation. I just think food looks better saturated. Everything looks better saturated. But compared to the original, I'll do not a reset, a compare. See how the color in the tiles is all sort of much more uniform, and now you can see they stand out. This is definitely an overcorrection, and Greg is correct that
if you can
sort of like
create an inverted L channel or make that bell curved L channel mask and maybe save some of that saturation. You can still do all of that right inside of here.
Oh yeah.
Save some of that saturation.
Sure.
Do all of that right inside of here.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. So to do that, we bring up the mask palette. We look at. I'm just going to sort of zip through this, but we can use the L channel as a mask. And inverted bell curve means we're going to retain the middle range of the mask, but not do as much on the extreme ends of the mask. So you'll see how that looks in a second here. As you can see, I'll go real extreme here. If I take the mask really low, then very little is happening to the color. You can see when I click compare, it looks. But as we bump this bell curve up, and you can use any shape for this curve, it doesn't have to be a bell curve. We will bump saturation in the midtones, but not do it so much in the shadows and highlights. And the beauty of that is that avoids that ugly blue cast in the shadows that we saw with the copper image, and it also means you don't get a color cast in the highlights, but you still get your good action here, as Greg was saying. So here I'll do a compare, and you'll see we're getting plenty of color here.
Can you show that mask what it looks like as a channel?
Price in our shadows and highlights. So that's.
Can you show that mask what it looks like as a channel?
Yeah. I'm going to try my little lizard tail move here just to see how that looks. So I don't know if I'm getting old or what, but I'm starting to like things looking a little darker and richer. Just looks better to me than it did when I was a young teenager, getting brilliant whites and dark blacks. So plus that's the same thing Ansel Adams did, so it must be good. As he got older, his pictures got darker. So
just show the mask as a channel.
Okay, now you were saying, Craig. Oh, to show the channel, yeah.
Show the mask as a channel.
Yeah, here's the mask as a channel. And wherever the mask is white, our curve is going to kick in and do something.
Can you
Wherever
pinch in the two sides at about the midline?
Or
just grab,
dark,
set a control point at the on the midline on the left and right of center, and just kind of pinch the curve in a little. Just pull it towards center. Yep, there you go. And on the same on the other side.
Oh, okay. Make it skinny.
Now flip back over.
Okay. Like that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, look, this makes it even more extreme. So as you can see, if we're saying, okay, mask, where do you want to change? Well, we're not going to change the sky. We're not going to change here. We're not going to change this area. And let's see how that looks in the actual image. So we'll show all channels. And, you know, it's quite nice. We're getting a lot of effect on those tiles like I wanted, but without driving the rest of the image crazy. Also, look what's coming out here. In
the iridescent green sign in the foreground too
has got this
much more control over that.
Textures to it. So
right in the middle. Up. Nope, iridescent green. That one. That's kind of what drove me to.
This one? That one. Oh, yes, you're right.
That's kind of what drove me to.
Yeah, good point. That was pinning. In fact, if we, I think if we do reset curve.
Edit.
Let's see. How do I reset a curve? Give me a break here. Who wrote this thing? Ah, here we go. So we're going to reset just the mask curve, and now when we bump the saturation, you'll see that. Well, yeah, the green sign is changing a little too much for our taste. Anyway, this is Lee and Greg have been really developing this concept of the saturation mask, and one of the most useful shapes they've come out is this inverted bell curve mask, so that you punch up the midtones without destroying the highlights and shadows. And you can move this around too if you have an image where, well, there's some colors in the upper areas. Like, look at those things are ready to take off into outer space now. So we don't really want that, but you can see the effect that this shape has. And you can also, there are additional masks you can play with here too. A skin tone mask is useful for portraits when you want to either protect skin tones or not, or change skin tones more drastically. So that's anyway, that's quite an interesting way to play with this image, both in RGB and LAB. And I'd like to finish. I promised someone on the net that I would do this move that involves, it's normally used for doing faces. And if you guys don't mind, I'd sort of like to show how that works.
Is this one of Lowell's?
Would that be okay? Do you have any questions, by the way, on
Beautiful shot, Lowell. Congratulations.
Image? Well, thank you.
Is this one of Lowell's?
Yeah, these are all Lowell's images.
Beautiful shot, Lowell.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, he sent me probably about 6 or 8 of them, and we've gone through 3 or 4. So I think we can.
Mike, may I ask? Yeah, when do you blur a mask and when not?
Mike, may I ask? Yeah, when do you blur a mask and when not?
That is a really good question, and the mask. There are 2 reasons to blur the mask, and the reason that I started off thinking was the most important, and I wish I had an example image for you here. I'd probably have to set one up, but the reason most people start off blurring a mask is because they're getting fringing along the horizon between the sky and, say, a mountain range or whatever is in the makes up your horizon. You tend to get a haloing around the edges. And so blurring will mediate that haloing somewhat. But that's not the real reason you want to blur a mask. And in fact, that blurring never really quite gets rid of all of it. It'll knock it back a little bit, but it won't get rid of the whole thing. So creating a sharp mask between sky and foreground is usually something you want to do in moderation. So I'm not sure if I can actually show you an example right now, but let's try that. The B channel in this case is often an extremely good mask for the sky because it includes blue, which, as we all know, that's the color of the sky. So let's take a look at what happens with this image when we bump saturation using a B mask. And I don't know if you can see it here, but the blue area of the mask is the sky is tending to gain saturation a little faster. And we can emphasize that by doing this. Let's get the mask and curve it up so that it's fairly extreme. Okay. So now we're getting some strange banding here. We haven't even gone to color mode yet. But there's an example of just this upper portion of the image. That's the sort of mask you might generate to modify just the sky. And as we start to do things, let's see if we can get a fringe to happen here. This will be the one time a fringe doesn't happen, so I won't be able to show you. It always works that way. Come on, fringe. There's a whole TV show just named after fringes. That's how big a problem it is. Okay. Okay, well I'm not getting a fringe here. But maybe we could do that some other time and show you how you get a fringe. But I wanted to go on to the second reason, and this is really the main reason that you would have the ability to blur the mask. And that is, suppose you're applying a curve that actually reduces, that knocks down the highlights and leaves the shadows alone. Okay, that's a fairly normal sort of curve. Something like, and here, unfortunately, I wish I had an image to show you, but just to show you the concept, suppose we had a curve like this that took detail out of the highlights but left it in the shadows. And now further suppose that we had a portion of the image that was a mixture of shadows and highlights, like a texture.
Yeah, you put the hurt on that.
This house, for example, in this area.
Yeah, you put the hurt on that.
Yeah, it looks really bad, right? Now, if we apply a mask that masks for limits the effect only to the highlights, it's going to knock the highlights in that area of the image down to where they blend in with the midtones. And so if you blur that mask, then paradoxically those highlights are going to jump out and you'll actually see more detail. And I can only just briefly touch on that topic right now. You really need to see it to believe it. It's just an incredible effect where you have this dingy image, you blur the mask, and the detail just pops out at you. And Dan Margulis actually specified the amount of blur for the masks as being none, medium, light, and wide. Those are his words that he chose. And depending on how you blur if you blur the mask, you'll actually get more detail in that portion of the image where the mask separated the highlights and shadows. And I just know, don't worry if you don't understand that, because it took me a week of hard thinking to figure it out. What we really need at some point in a future session is to show you an example where blurring the mask actually makes the detail pop out more. So anyway, that's a longer answer than you wanted. But those are the two main images that reasons that I know of for blurring the mask, is to get rid of fringes.
One of the side effects of a mask that you're talking about, Mike, is that it's going to offset some of the contrast between light and dark in the image, as you had said. And so when you blur that, you restore the original contrast that was there while still maintaining the overall effect that you've set. So, for instance, if you had a leaf and you masked it, the veins in the leaf may lose detail, but if you blur the mask, the veins in the leaf are going to come back.
Oh, yeah. I just had a major moment here. Like, check this out, guys. We have the image actually sitting in front of us. If you look at this area that got trashed,
can you zoom it in, Mike, so we can see it?
Watch what happens when I blur the mask. Nothing.
And at no time during the trick did the fingers leave Mike's hand.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And at no time during the trick did the fingers leave Mike's hand.
I thought
it's very image dependent, everyone.
Oh, well.
It really is.
Sorry, guys.
It's very image dependent, everyone. It really is.
It is, yeah, and I'm not sure I'm doing it.
You had one more
right
image
here.
You were going to show, Mike.
So, okay, well, yeah, I wanted to show you this effect that uses faces, and I just realized I do not have the correct images in place to do that. Well, actually, I do have a couple images up here. Do you guys mind if I play with put Greg's head onto Martin's body? Would that be okay? Let's see. I don't think that's gonna. No, the images aren't quite good enough.
Yeah, Martin doesn't deserve that.
Let me look.
My wife will complain.
Frankly. Let's.
There's a picture of this Michael G. Russell looks kind of old in front of this yellow car. Maybe we can paste that on something.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll fix that next week.
Yeah, yeah. We'll fix that next week. Let's see. God, all I can think of is Tom Cruise, because that's the example that. Well, I hate to do this, but I'm just going to use Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, if that's okay with you guys. And I really wish I had some, because this is exactly the same image that was used by another person. And okay, let's see now. Oh boy. So, Greg, could you sort of wave hands for a while?
First of all, Mike, I'd like to take a second to just thank you for being willing to do this. It took the heat off of me a little bit today for some personal reasons, which was great. But also, I think it's wonderful that you're willing to share your time with everybody to do this, because, there are a lot of times in these calls when I get questions that I just cannot really answer, and you're the guy. So I appreciate you being willing to do this, and I hope you've enjoyed it enough that you'll come back and do it again, because we always have an interesting discussion when I do these things. So, are you ready yet, or do I still have to make time?
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed this a lot, and I'm astonished at the features in this program that I've forgotten existed. Or forgotten where they are. So, okay, here's one. This is, I guess it's Brad Pitt in his Benjamin Button role. And, okay, here we go. Here's good-looking guy here who, I don't know if you guys know about Tom Cruise. And he's pretty famous. Anyway, he misbehaved and no one likes him anymore, which I think is very unfair. He jumped up and down on a couch and insulted somebody. So, okay. Okay, now we'll get our image. Okay, let's see how well this works. So there's Tom, and now where is my other image? By golly. There he is. Okay, so the way to do this effect is you first you lasso a mask-shaped area of one of the faces. And it doesn't have to be exact or anything. Then you copy and paste that on top of the other individual. And in this case, our resolutions don't match very well. I have to apologize for that, but so we're going to now.
So which feature are you using, skew or?
That's wrong. Let's do this.
Which feature are you using, skew or?
Yeah, I did Control T, which will take the area. Now that's looking pretty good right there, but we're going to have the opacity and make sure that the features line up reasonably well. So yeah, that's pretty good. So okay, I'm going to click the checkbox and we'll accept this. Now notice the main defect now is that the colors don't match. One of them has a yellow skin tone and the other has a different color. So what we're going to do is right click on what I would call the face mask, the top one, and click select pixels. That creates a selection. We're now going to invert the selection, and we're doing all this monkey motion here because we want to shrink that selected area by about 6 pixels. Okay, so we inverted it, and we have a we have a contract. I don't know why we didn't just use that. Gonna expand it by 6 pixels and then re-invert. Okay, and the whole reason for this is we want that selection to be a little bit smaller than the mask we put on. Okay, so now we'll invert again, and we're going to hide the mask layer, go back to select the Tom Cruise layer, and when we delete, we should see white behind Tom's face here. Okay, now what we have are essentially a face area that slightly overlaps Tom Cruise's face, and that's important because the next command we're going to use is normally used to equalize the colors in panoramas, and we're going to get rid of the selection here with Control D. So now we just have 2 overlapping layers, and here's where the magic happens. Auto blend layers, what it's trying to do is take 2 pieces of a panorama and average them out so that they match, so that the colors match. But when we apply it to our face thing, we select blend matching panorama, and boom. Isn't that great? In one fell swoop, I'll do Control Z here. That's how it looked before, and now they're beautifully matched. That's the trick I wanted to show you, and the really cool part is where those 2 colors just auto blend with each other. It's just like magic. And so I imagine you can use this not just for faces, but for any place where you want 2 portraits to match each other, or say you have an image with pictures of several people in it. You can use it to match those colors together. But you will have to arrange to have the colors overlap slightly. So anyway, that's the little trick I wanted to show you at the end of it all. And thanks to everyone for coming. I really enjoyed having you here. This is really.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
And I guess
thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Good afternoon.
Okie doke. Alrighty. You're more than welcome. Okay, and I'll put the materials up on the web page later today. So anyway, take care.